Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's IRMS Legal session. So my name is Iram Ditter and I'm the IRMS Legal Group Chair. Thank you for joining us today on the topic of Microsoft 365. How do you get the best out of Microsoft 365 and persuade your purse holders to invest in Microsoft 365 InfoGov, not just IT? So today our speakers are Sharon Erling Brown and Rachel Martin from Leadership Through Data, who I'll pass off to now to introduce themselves. Before I do that, however, just a quick note. Please post your questions in the questions section at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and feel free to chat amongst yourselves using the chat section. That will just help our speakers to see your questions and be able to answer them more easily. Thank you and enjoy today's session.
Thank you. Sharon, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Sharon Erling Brown. I'm the Global Operations Director here at Leadership Through Data. Apologies, I haven't got my camera on today. Normally I am here and you can all see me live, not just my avatar. But unfortunately, I had a little bit of issues this morning, but I'm definitely here and I'm available if you've got any questions for me as well. So just wanted to say hello. I've put a little hello on the chat there. It'd be lovely if anybody else can say hello. Just make sure that chat's working. Our sessions are very interactive. As Iram said there, questions, please ask as we go along. I'll be in the background keeping an eye out for them and letting Rachel know as and when they come up so we can make sure we can answer as many questions as possible today.
Perfect. Thank you, Sharon. So I'm Rachel Mitchell and I have done a couple of seminars recently, so you might be fed up of seeing me. But I have two hats. So my first hat is that I'm a data protection officer and an information governance lead for the Care Inspectorate here in Scotland, who regulate care services. But my other hat, I'm a consultant and an LTD trainer for Leadership Through Data. And I tend to work in all things relating to information governance, so data protection, records management, but also putting the information governance into Microsoft 365 and making sure that that system is working for us rather than against us, which sometimes it can, as you probably know. Please find me on LinkedIn. I love to chat through any scenarios and discussions. And today we're going to really explore some thinking around how you persuade your management to invest in Microsoft 365 in its holistic nature, particularly information governance, and not just look at it as another IT asset or technology asset. As Sharon said, happy to take questions throughout, but we will have time at the end for some questions as well and some discussions. So while we're thinking about this question, I will introduce to you a poll a bit later on in the discussions. So I'm going to make you work a little bit as well. So the poll questions are actually already up. So if anybody wants to answer those now, but I've got a slide where I'll launch that as well. So please go onto the poll and start to answer the questions as we go through, and then we'll come back to the results a little bit later on. Okay, so thinking about the question. Now, again, this is the way I like to think about M365. I am a person that thinks in pictures and in diagrams, quite often triangles, which is a little bit odd. No triangles on this one, though. I like to think about Microsoft 365 in layers. So we need to think about the fact that we've got different capabilities within this one system. So right at the front end, we have applications. So things that we are familiar with over quite a lot of time, which we used to call Office 365. And we used to refer to Office 365 for things like Word, PowerPoint, those applications where we create content. We now refer to this whole ecosystem, if you like, as Microsoft 365, because it's much bigger than just these front-end applications. So this is one of the things we need to try and get across to our leaders in our organizations, that this isn't just one technology asset. This is a collection of things that we need to consider as an ecosystem in a holistic way. So we've got our Microsoft Azure platform, and this is where our ecosystem, if you like, our tenancy will sit within the cloud environment. And remember that cloud just means it's hosted by someone else. So nothing complicated. It just means that we're hosting our data on someone else's servers. So within the first layer, we've got the Azure platform. So that's where all our data and our applications sit. And then on that, we have our organizational tenancy. So that gives us our first boundary level, if you like, for our organization in terms of governance and security. So that's how when we log in with our, so mine for Leadership Through Data is rachel@leadershipthroughdata.co.uk. As I log into Microsoft using that tenancy identification, it then notices who I am, what my license conditions are, and then I get access to what I need to within this ecosystem. So then we have the general administration centers. So these general administration centers cover many capabilities within this ecosystem. And we're going to talk about those in a bit more detail, particularly the purview type capabilities that relate very closely to our hearts in information governance. And within Purview, we have obviously compliance tools there. And as Microsoft describes it, Purview is a family of data governance, risk and compliance solutions. So we're already starting to get more into detail about actually this is bigger than a technology asset. We need to think about more from an organizational perspective. And this can help us govern, protect and manage our entire data estate that we've got within this security boundary. And as I said, we're going to look at that in a bit more detail. So then we have specific application admin centers. So it's not as easy as just throwing out different applications like Teams and SharePoint and Outlook or Exchange. We then have application centers which actually link directly to the control and governance of those specific applications. It can be overwhelming. I often have this thought where you start to feel a little bit sick, like it's thinking about the edge of space where you're not really sure what's going on and what's next and what's out there. But we just have to take it step by step. But when you're trying to give the key messages to your grown-ups, as I like to call them in the organization, you need to make sure that you have a clear plan and pathway and roadmap in terms of what strategically you want to achieve in this whole ecosystem. And then you need to sell that plan to them. And we'll look at how we might do that in a bit more detail. So moving away from sort of the architecture of the system, if you like, got to different ways of working with Microsoft 365. And that's through different ways that we've rolled it out. And this said the time is now. It does not matter what has gone on before. Wherever you are in your Microsoft 365 journey, whether you, and we'll work that out a bit when we get into the polls, we need to understand actually that it doesn't matter where you are now. What happens is looking forward. And it's about trying to reset or rebalance and think about what your roadmap now is in terms of your organizational priorities. So many organizations, as we know, implemented M365 using the COVID method. We need something now because everybody's gone home. And we were faced with unprecedented scenarios and we just had to do something. Okay, so lots of people rolled out Teams in that way, but didn't really think about the fact that with Teams, we've got all these settings and configurations within the Teams admin centers. We've got controls we need to think about. We've got containers we need to think about in terms of records management. And it was a bit ungoverned. So it was a bit like the Wild West. But it's not too late is the messaging I want to get across. And this is the messaging you should be getting across to your senior managers, your grown-ups, to say, actually, we can start to fix this. It might feel like it's a massive sort of amorphous lump of stuff, because sometimes it does, that edge of space feeling, but it's not too late to fix it. So what can we start to think about in terms of that roadmap to fixing our Wild West scenario? So here's poll time, everybody. Can you please go on to the polls, and can you please make sure you answer where you are in your Microsoft journey? So just to explain my very poorly worded questions, apologies. How do you describe your rollout position for M365? I want you to pick one. Are you thinking about it or planning for it? Did you do a COVID rollout or have just rolled out the front end like the apps, Teams and SharePoint and crossed your fingers? Have you done, and I seem to have 1, 2, 4 and 5. There isn't a number 3. That's just a test, everybody. Number 4, exploit the capabilities. Do you exploit the capabilities of the admin centers in part? So you're using some things like audit, data loss prevention, some aspects of purview. And number 4/5, the all singing, all dancing position, where you've embraced all aspects of the administration. You've got all of those layers covered, and you're working with controls and applications and have that integrated approach. So I'd like to know where you are in your journey. So if you could start to answer that poll for us, that would be great. Okay, so it all comes down to money. I have literally had a conversation this morning with some of my big bosses about the fact that there is none this next financial year coming. And I think a lot of public bodies are in that scenario, and a lot of private bodies as well, private organisations. Now, I went on to the dreaded or the welcomed, depending on how you view it, Copilot searching on the Microsoft Edge under Bing. And I asked, what does an E5 license give me? So you will be familiar that we have license conditions within Microsoft, and different licenses will give you different capabilities or different depth of capabilities. So we need to think about our licensing conditions and what that does give us when we're thinking about our roadmap. Now, we always take AI searches with a pinch of salt, and I will particularly do that having been on the Copilot IRMS demonstration yesterday afternoon. Lots of food for thought. But you can see here, just in one search, and I just said, what does an E5 license give me? It says it gives me a wide range of features. Productivity apps, advanced security, compliance capability, voice and analytical capabilities, identity and threat protection, information protection and governance. I could go on and on and on and on. This is what we need to try and explain succinctly and clearly to our managers. This is a whole way of working. It's not just one technical asset. And that's what we need to try and get to when we're thinking about actually cost. What are we paying for? Let's bring it back to terms that our managers at the moment really, really understand. So just thinking about what the capabilities are next. And I'm not going to cover all the different admin centres because we would be here all afternoon. And I'm only going to cover those bits that I think are pertinent from an information and records perspective. So obviously there's much more in this beast than we're going to talk about today. But the first thing I want to talk about is Microsoft Defender. So Microsoft Defender is the administration centre predominantly for security. I am not a security expert. I am not a cybersecurity expert, and I do not want to be, because there's lots of people that are doing that. But we do need to be aware of security from a data protection perspective, from a records management, role-based access control perspective, and also from a compliance perspective to make sure that we also need to worry about the confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility aspects when we're dealing with things like breaches. So this is important to us. So I've put a little plug of my little local castle of Broughty Ferry, which is looking very pretty there in the sunshine. But that was all about physical security. So now we need to think about cyber and information security. Now with Microsoft Defender, we have different capabilities. This slide I thought was a really nice summary, which I have obviously taken from Microsoft, and I will give them the credits. We've got prevention tools in there, so preventing something from happening. So hunting, as we call it, from an information security perspective. We've got user awareness and training built in to allow us to do things like phishing simulations in there, which are really key for us. And some public bodies have already suffered from different types of ransomware attacks, etc. We've got detection capabilities to actually look for and then block threats so that they're making sure that they're quarantined within a space within your ecosystem. We've got investigation tools to actually look and see what's happened. The system can do that to a certain perspective without human involvement, and then it can flag to you an alert when it thinks specific actions need to take place. And then we've got the response. So we've got some way of responding to events that are happening that are threatening the security of our information and data. That is massive in itself. So that's Defender in a nutshell. Okay, that's a very, very broad brush overview. But that in itself is something that your organization should be interested in. Use the cybersecurity buzzwords because they're all out there. And if you're going for things like cybersecurity standards, whatever they may be for your organization and your sector, then that kind of thing is tick, 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 tick when you're starting to look at the scoring in that kind of arena. So first off, that's Defender. Let's get somewhere a bit closer to our hearts. Let's go for a bit of a chat about Purview. Now, I think I know Purview. I train on Purview. And when I started to do my due diligence in relation to what's happening in the Purview space, and I must say there has recently been the Microsoft Ignite releases from their quarterly conference. I am not all over that because it literally is just landing at the moment, isn't it? So there might be some changes to this that I have not yet included in this slide pack, so apologies. But within Purview, we can split our capabilities into three main areas. We've got data security, more data security than Defender. We've got data governance, and we've got risk and compliance. And the terminology is a bit, I'm going to be honest, for me, personal opinion, it's a bit techy. So most of our records management tools are kind of governed in the risk and compliance space in this presentation. That doesn't feel right for me. That's not useful language. So we need to make sure that we can translate that into something that our organisation understands in terms of the capabilities that we need to satisfy from a statutory and regulatory perspective. So let's delve into this in a little bit more detail. Data security. There are lots of amazing tools in relation to data security within the Microsoft platform. Some are good. I am not affiliated to Microsoft. Some are good, some are bad, and some are just pure ugly. So some of the capabilities aren't perfect, but we have them in there, and we need to make an honest assessment, if you like, as to what we think is useful for our organisation and what isn't. So when we're thinking through all of these capabilities, we need to start with not even looking at the technology. You should have some kind of business plan or risk log that says, actually, what are the issues that really energize my organisation at the moment around information and data? It might be that you've had a recent breach that's been reportable and everyone's running around thinking that cannot happen again. It might be that you have recently got a new data protection officer and actually they are really keen, really good to go. So, you know, actually that door's a little bit open for you. So think about what your drivers are within your business. And don't forget to link it back to the context of your organisation. So what do I mean by context? I work in a regulatory authority. So the context of my organisation is actually making sure that care is at the right level across Scotland. We need to link back our thinking in information and data back to that organisational context, whether it's policing, whether it's making widgets, whatever it is. You need to make your management understand it from your organisational context, because otherwise it will not land. And we'll talk a bit about landing messages in a little while. So looking at the data security capabilities, we've got data loss prevention, music to our ears, putting policies in place to prevent accidental sharing of information, such as sensitive data in emails. Some of these tools are kind of layered, and you can start with a really simple approach to them and then get more complex. And I would always suggest that approach. Don't go in all big guns at once, because A, your organisation will be overwhelmed in terms of the users, and B, it's hard to land that. So always be incremental and show where you are now and where you're trying to be for your first step, for your second step, etc., etc., etc. So data loss prevention. Microsoft Purview information barriers. Now, this is an interesting one, and this is relatively new. These policies prevent scenarios such as a teacher in one school communicating or sharing files with students in another school, but you might be part of the same school district. So it's about identifying what boundaries you have, what firewalls you have, and making sure if someone tries to cross those firewalls, that computer says no in some kind of way. Yeah. So it can be something like that scenario with the teachers. It could be if you're in an organisation that's doing sort of more sensitive work in terms of, say, policing, that you've got something like a covert human intelligence source area. Not that you would keep that kind of intelligence on the system, but you might be talking about it in management meetings, etc. It could be that you just don't allow anything from there to break out to other kind of functional areas. So you can put in those information barriers, those firewalls. So that's another tool in Purview. Information protection gives you the tools, and this is what Microsoft says, to know your data, protect your data, and prevent data loss. So you can automatically, depending on your license, identify sensitive information types that have been embedded in the system and put some control around them. I always like to think of security as a bit of an onion, and it's about getting those layers of that onion sorted within your organisation, because the more layers you have, the more secure your data is. But it's all about risk and resource. If it's open data that's on your intranet, you don't need to worry about loads and loads of security layers. So risk and resource is also a good way of presenting ideas to your organisation. So that's information protection, lots of other tools in that space. Insider risk management does exactly what it says on the tin. It actually correlates various signals to identify potential malicious or inadvertent insider risks. And it will identify those and it will flag them to you. Microsoft Purview Privileged Access Management is the last one we're going to talk about in data security. And this allows you to make time-bound controls to admin accounts. So if somebody's going to do an admin action within your tenancy, it allows it to be time-bound, so they have to say when they're logging into that sort of capability and when they're coming back out of it, and activate that capability rather than just have it associated with their license, their personal license continually, which is an information risk. The person might not want to intentionally do anything wrong, but it just means that it's just less controlled, less layers of your onion. So that's data security, okay? This isn't just a technology that we're rolling out. This is a changed way of working. So all of those data security aspects are available within our Purview environment. Okay, I'm just going to check the questions. Sharon, you're monitoring the questions, I'm assuming.
We do have one.
Okay.
So Sonia's put, are the tools you ran through in Defender only available in the E5 license, or are these also available in E3?
Okay. You know, as well as I do, the licensing is the most confusing part of Microsoft 365. What you'll tend to find is, that's a really good question, Sonia, but really hard to answer for each of those capabilities. What you'll tend to find is you'll get a baseline capability in E3 and a more advanced capability in E5. But what I will do, we can share there's some really good links to licensing, which sort of gives you a bit more of a granular space. And some of the links that I've got around licensing aren't just about from Microsoft, they're actually from other resources. So I'm quite happy to share that afterwards, which might help you to answer those questions and some of the other licensing questions, which I know will pop up. So I hope that's okay. Sharon, remind me to share those links afterwards.
Will do.
Okay, let's move off data security and move into data governance. Now, this is an area that's called data governance. We're back to terminology again. But for me, although there's some terminology in here which makes me sit up as an information governance manager, if you like, it's more about data from a data analytics and data insights capability rather than an information and records management capability in my mind. Don't get me wrong, some of the things in here will be useful to us as information and records managers, but it's not as easy as saying, so I'm going to talk about things like data catalogs and data maps. It's not as easy as saying, actually, if you create a data map in Microsoft Purview, you can then just link it to your information asset owners and you're all in a comfy world within your business classification scheme. It's not that kind of mapping. It does give you insights into how your organization is using data and information, but there's a few steps you'd need to go through between. It doesn't give you a perfect answer from an information governance perspective around things like information assets, owners, custodians. So take this one with a little bit of a pinch of salt and do a bit more research if you think it sounds attractive. Obviously, I'm not going to go through each capability today, but I'm just giving you a sense of what's out there. So from a data governance perspective, we've got the data catalog. Now, Microsoft Purview can allow you to create this Microsoft Purview data map where you can actually identify what data is needed for specific workloads. So that's quite good thinking so with my data protection officer hat on, processing activities, what information assets are underpinning my processing activities that I might need to do data protection impact assessments on is kind of where I would go with that in my head from an information governance perspective. So it allows you to create a data catalog and do data discovery to find out what data is being used for what purposes effectively. We also have data estate insights, but this is more about how the data is being looked after within your organization. So it refers to health, but it's data health. It's not anything to do with like sensitive information types to do with health. So it's about how your organization's data is managed and governed within the platform, how it's being used, inventory and ownership comes into that, and curation and governance. But as I said, it's a bit of a step away from what we would want from an information governance perspective, but it does provide you with the capability to run these data maps and data catalogs, which can start to underpin some of our information asset thinking. Okay. And I'm sorry I can't go into a lot more detail in these, but I'm just giving you some flavors of things and how big this is to speak to your organization about. Microsoft Purview data sharing as well, which is one that's in there. And the data sharing, you can now share in place from the Azure platform. So rather than sharing from within your tenancy, there are sharing capabilities that are available from the cloud platform itself. So I'm not technical. I know enough tech to get me by. And I'm not going to go into that in any more detail because that's much too technical for me. But it just means that there are sharing opportunities for data sharing that might be of real benefit for organizations if we know where they are, how to use them, and for what business purpose we want to exploit them. Okay. So that's a little run through data governance. Remember, we are still in Microsoft Purview. This is just one admin center. So this is the kind of, obviously you wouldn't go through all of this level of detail with your management, but you need to give them the sense of how vast these capabilities are and making sure that you're thinking about it in the right way to make sure that you've got an information governance approach rather than just a technical approach. I think we're a little bit better than we were at this kind of thing, but we've still got a way to go. Right, the bit that I think is really critical from information and governance perspective, risk and compliance. So the risk and compliance heading, if you like, within this sort of capability descriptions in Microsoft covers all the lovely things that we want to really get our hands on from information and records management perspective. It covers audit, Microsoft Purview audit. Now, everything you do in Microsoft is logged within the audit logs, okay? And you can conduct investigations. So that could be something like conduct. Why did Rachel Mitchell send that piece of information to that person at that point in time? Or download that information to her local download folder, if you're allowed to, at that point in time. So it can do that kind of investigations. What time did Rachel Mitchell log on to the system because we're worried about her time management and think she might be fibbing on her timesheets? All that good stuff is in that kind of investigations bracket under this. Compliance checking. This is one of my bugbears at the moment, and I work with a lot of different organisations. This is the bit we keep forgetting about. So when you're talking to your management, do not forget compliance. So for example, I'm going to go on to talk about e-discovery, which is a biggie that's flagging this up to me at the moment. If we have a business case around Microsoft 365 and we get a pot of money, we normally get that pot of money around specific capabilities like review and retention, which I'm going to come on to, or around specific technologies, so the license or capabilities that we need to maybe buy an extra bit of licensing for, so a security and compliance license. What we forget is, how do we make sure that people are complying with the policies we've written? So what are the users doing in this space? But also, how are we making sure that we don't have that kind of insider threat? And I know that there's a module that looks for insider threat, but say giving somebody the crown jewels like e-discovery, who's actually going to go in and dip sample that to make sure that Rachel is doing what she said she was going to do on that case search for freedom of information? So please, please, please don't forget that compliance check. It's not audit necessarily. It is more about compliance, but there needs to be resource to do it. And in a lot of organisations, we forget that. And I think you find that that's the bit that you're suddenly scrabbling around and everyone's saying, well, actually, that's your job. Or IT, that's your job. And actually, you need to define whose job that is from the beginning. So don't forget compliance. We also have incident identification in the purview audit space. So you can be looking for unusual events in audit. So things like, I logged in at 1 p.m. in Scotland, and then I also logged in again at 1:15 p.m. from India, which means that somebody's has logged in under my persona. Okay. I've just got a very funny spinning wheel. Can someone just tell me that they can hear me and see me okay?
Everything seems fine my end, Rachel.
Yeah,
smashing.
That's fine.
That's good. Sorry, just had a very strange message. I'm not that used to a live storm, so I never know what's going on. Okay, so carrying on, we're thinking about Microsoft Purview Communication Compliance. That can help you track, again, bit of a weird title, because it actually looks for things like harassment, profanity, threats, inappropriate communication of sensitive information against policy. So this is more about, actually, we have an organisational code of conduct. They are not complying, or somebody's being bullied, or something's happening that actually we need to pick that up from an HR perspective, maybe, if that's the right place to do it. So that's got a bit of a misleading title as well, I think. So that's about actually code of conduct, really, and tracking those kind of issues happening within your system automatically, which I think is a really good one. Compliance manager is about assessing your organisation against industry standards, regulations and certifications. So think about how you can use that in your organisation. So actually, there might be ways that people are doing that manually at the moment by doing surveys and different bits and pieces. Actually, could the Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager take away the need to do that manual check? Are there ways that we can use embedded tools that we're already paying the license for? So let's think about how we can employ those. And finally, the two areas really close to our hearts: data lifecycle management, retention policies, labels and label policies, and all the different ways you can put those policies and labels within the system in order to manage your information through a life cycle. I know that lots of people on this call will be dealing with freedom of information, will be dealing with things like freedom of information, things like subject access requests. Sorry, I just saw a question pop up and it distracted me. And also at the moment, we've got the inquiry thing going on. We need to start to get rid of information that we don't need, legally don't need, no text, no problem kind of situations. And data lifecycle management, I know, is close to all of your hearts. So even if we want to just put this into place as a priority for all the good reasons that we know about, we need to think about what's our roadmap for doing that. What are the bits of this toolkit need to sit around it, like compliance, like audit? Are people doing what we've asked them to do? So even if you pick one strand of this capability and are submitting that to your grown-ups to say, actually, we need to think about this from the holistic perspective, but ultimately it's about data lifecycle management and it will do all those good statutory things, etc., etc., etc. We need to think about what other aspects of the platform help us to do that and help us to land that. And I touched on e-discovery. E-discovery is fabulous, but scary. E-discovery is like opening the lid of Pandora's box, because once you know, you can't unknow, information governance people. And it will search across all of your repositories, depending on your license, so E3 or E5. And you can find information that relates to things, again, like investigations, statutory inquiries, the inquiries that are going on with capital I, and compliance, and actually just IT trying to find misplaced content. You know, I've lost a document that the chief executive wants, and I think it's called this, and I think I created it at this point. So lots of different uses for e-discovery. E-discovery, it is critical that you have an audit and a compliance that is not done by the people creating the cases. And I could go on about that all day at the moment, because that's all I seem to be talking about. Compliance manager from Madeline, cover international regulation standards and practices, or is it predominantly American? They're getting better, Madeline. So it does cover international. So it tends to cover things like ISO, and it covers things like, so some of the standards are things like COBIT, so the IT type frameworks and scenarios. So yes, it's not perfect. It's not going to cover everything, but it might just tick a box that your organisation could then stop doing kind of manual surveying and looking, or it could support that. So good question. Okay, risk and compliance. So what we need to think about, I've actually just missed one point that I really wanted to make. Let me just go back 1 second, and apologies, because I think this is a bit of yeah, so one thing that I missed on the defender point, and I just want to come back to that. As I said, I'm not an information security person, but one of the things that I did want to mention and I've actually put on my notes that excites me from an information governance perspective, in the Cloud Act catalogue that's in Microsoft Defender, which not many information governance people will have access to that space. It's predominantly going to be in the IT or InfoSec space. But there is a risk assessment tool in there that actually assesses 31,587 applications against 4 categories. There's a general category that looks at the company behind the applications. So it looks at how long they've been in existence, where they're based. So thinking about data transfer. There's security is the second one, which looks at key factors like, do they use multi-factor authentication? There's a third one, which is compliance, which looks at international standards. So coming back to Madeline's point a bit, such as ISO standards and COBIT. And there's a fourth bit that looks at legal aspects surrounding that application. So it looks at things like information rights. Are there breach reports? Are there GDPR readiness statements and privacy statements? Now, I didn't know that existed till about 3 years ago, probably. And now I go straight to that space and I look at the risk assessment. If anyone comes to me as a data protection officer and says, I want to put this app, can I use this app? I want this app. I go straight there and have a quick look to see if it's already been risk assessed by Microsoft. It isn't perfect, but it gives me that baseline assessment. So if it's based in, I don't know, Uzbekistan, computer says no, or Rachel says no. So it just gives me that immediate kind of baseline assessment of the app. And you can have read access to that as information and governance specialist without playing in the defender space. So I think that's really one that we need to understand from an information governance and data protection perspective. Before I go on to this slide, I want to know how we've done with the polling. So let's have a little look. So we asked you to name, to pick one option, and we've got, did you a COVID rollout and just a front-end apps? 57%, so that's the biggest amount. Are we thinking about it or planning for M365? 19%. Are we exploiting some of the capabilities of admin centres and data loss prevention? 19%. And 5%, congratulations to you, feel like you've fully embraced all aspects of administration, applications and controls. So that is amazing. So I am in awe because I don't feel like I have continually, I keep finding little things that I think are important. But it's about not deciding you want everything. It's about making sure you've got what you need for your critical path for the capabilities that your organisation needs. So thank you for answering that. So for all of the people that aren't in the 5%, we need to show our management what kind of capabilities are out there. Please feel free to use this slide to say, actually, we've got this whole ecosystem that's sitting in the cloud that we're using. We've got different layers within that ecosystem. We've then got administration centers like Defender, which is the top right, and Purview. Apologies, I forgot to put a label on the Defender one. We need to be thinking about this from a holistic, I know I keep using that word, can't think of a better one, holistic perspective. And we need to make sure that we are thinking about how we're landing that messaging when we're trying to get our capabilities embedded within the organisation. So, sorry, I went back to an old slide. Let me just catch up. Now, we've just looked at a tiny aspect of the capabilities in the M365 environment. But one other thing I did was I Googled, other search engines are available, how much an E5 license costs if you just Google it and see what the price comes back in pounds. Without including VAT, it was £52.40 per user per month. That is a lot of money that your organisation is spending on this. So one of the things I thought would be really helpful would be to look at what percentage of the capability of the platform you think are using for your £52.40 a month. So find out from your IT or procurement or whoever adds the statistic, how much you're spending on Microsoft 365, and then what percentage of the platform you think you're using. And I think that's a powerful way of making an argument to say, we are not using this enough. We need more resources thrown at how we embed this in our organisation. This slide, you either love it or you hate it. And apologies to those that do come on some of my seminars or my training, because I use it every time. I think it's really important to understand the capabilities in how Microsoft have deployed them and created them for us. So what did Microsoft envisage the architecture would be? And this modern collaborative architecture slide, I think, really sums it up really well. Do not get scared by the amount of complexity on it. It's giving you some key messaging. It's giving you the messaging that within Microsoft 365, we work as an individual, we work as a team, we work as a community and an organisation. So remember that organisational context. And we need to make sure that we are not stifling the architecture in the way that we're setting up the technology, so that our technical architecture in our organisation It's about collaboration. It's about that dare to share question. So when your organization wants to lock everything down and you think actually that's not appropriate, because otherwise we're ending up with just things like how we used to have it in shared drives, we're paying £50 per person for this collaboration. So this is another good way of saying we don't want to get this wrong, because we might have just stayed with our shared drives and Outlook, because we are not using M365 in the way in which it was envisaged it should be used. We're not exploiting our license cost. Okay, and I think money is the key driver at the moment, isn't it? Sorry, Microsoft Azure versus Microsoft 365. I'm going to come back to that question, because I'll go back to my slide, Laura. So I'll come back to that at the end. And the Defender Checker, I will also come back to that, and I will put a bit more detail around that at the end, if that's okay. Okay, it's all about landing the requirement. And this is what this talk was supposed to be about, giving you some key nuggets in terms of being able to press the right buttons with your organization to say, actually, if you do this, if you don't do this, sorry, then this is the consequence. The first thing I would say is identify what governance structure this best lands at. Now, let me explain that. It might be that it's actually your risk forum. It might be your audit and risk committee, because actually the biggest drivers in your organization might be your information risks. It might be your data protection officer that's going to be the key person that's going to help you land this. It might be about business management. It might be that it needs to go through your traditional structures for hierarchy, so up through to your executive directorate, whatever that governance structure is, because it's about pounds and pence and resources, that risk and resource and cost question. So identify where you're best going to land this, and sometimes to identify that, you need to think about who are going to be your biggest supporters. Who is this going to land best with, and move towards that forum first, okay? The second thing is to speak to key stakeholders who will be present in that meeting in advance. I know you know this, but we always forget because we run out of time. That to me is the most important thing, is to make sure that you have spoken to each and every person that's going to be present in that meeting, found what makes them tick from an information and governance perspective, and ensure that's in your paper and your presentation. Yeah, so get the buy-in before you go in, because their issues might be totally different to yours, because we look at things with different lenses, and you do not want to be navel gazing with this, because you want to get the organizational buy-in. Don't just submit a paper, ask to present it. Sharon's going to talk a bit about the LTD way at the end of this presentation, and it's so important to be passionate about what you're saying, but also to make sure that you're pressing those right buttons, and you can't do that with a flat document. You can try, but it's better to do it with a presentation. We're also going to talk about, and Jackie, our CEO at LTD, is all about imagery, not about wording on your slides. I haven't used any words on my slides. You will get my notes, so you will get some words once you get the presentation, but make sure you're using imagery that's powerful and that people will remember. Don't just think about using lots of words. And the last point is the one I made a bit earlier, which is work out how much your organization is paying for licenses and what percentage of the capability you are currently using. We're throwing money out the window if we're not using some of this capability. And I'm not saying we need to use all of it. I'm saying we need to incrementally decide what's the best capability for what we need to achieve as an organization, and then work that through step by step, year by year. Okay, I'm going to come back to the questions. So Laura, coming back to your, let me do that question first. I'm just going to go back to a slide, if that's okay, everybody. Excuse me a second, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to go right back to my first one. So in terms of Azure, so this was the layers I was talking about. So apologies if I didn't go into quite enough detail. So this is about the layers. So Microsoft Azure is versus Microsoft 365. So Azure is a platform that sits in a cloud environment. So that's our first layer that we go into, the Azure platform. So it's basically what hosts our Microsoft 365 tenancy. And the Azure could have other data and other applications on it, not just Microsoft 365. So then you have the Microsoft 365 organizational tenancy, which is shown by this box, which then effectively you log into, which is your organizational space. So the Azure platform is available for all organizations to use, and then you put onto that platform in the cloud what you want to work with, and Microsoft 365 is just one of the applications that sits on there. The Defender Checker. Now, the Defender Checker, I think it might be easiest if I pop a link to you to the Microsoft resource, but I think the link is actually on my slide. Let me just check. It's the Cloud Apps Risk Assessment. Data security. No, I'm going to put that link on as well. So I'll make sure that's on the notes on the slide so that when you get the slide pack, or we can send it round after the meeting, if that's okay, Sharon.
Yeah, absolutely. So do we have any more questions from anybody else at the moment? I think something popped up there for another question. Let's have a quick look. I think that is everything.
Right, yeah. So I'm going to pop your slides up then, Sharon. Hold on.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Rachel. I know for me, I always learn something on your sessions. It'd be lovely to see if anybody can use the emojis, little thumbs up. If anybody else has learned anything from the session today, it'd be really nice to see some feedback there. On the subject of feedback, just while you're doing your little emojis on the chat, we do love feedback, and we like to know how you found the session today, but also what kind of things, what's your issues and needs at the moment. Pop that down on the feedback. You are the guys that need to tell us what your issues are, what your needs are, what you're facing, what you're struggling with. And then that's really the basis that we work from to then design our courses for you, design our webinars and workshops. So there's a little QR code on the screen there. Please do take a little snap of that and feed back to us. Alternatively, in the chat, I have put my email address there as well. So if you've got any ideas for anything going forward, then please email me directly. We do have some new workshops now as well for the Microsoft 365 environment. The best way that I can explain those are basically a little bit of consultancy there for you, where we'll go through ideas on basically how to start your Microsoft project, how to continue with that, and just little snippets there. So that's something that's really good, that gives a little bit of consultancy guidance through where to start and where to move forward. So once again, little QR code there, take a little snap. If you haven't got your phones with you, then I'm happy to put links out to you later on, and we can put them in the notes of the slides as well. We also have our courses, not just our workshops. So we've got our SharePoint and Purview courses. So if you really need help with the nitty gritty, we are here. They are all designed by records managers for records managers. So just give us a shout again, take a snap of the QR code, and we will help you with that. We have our webinars, our free webinars as well. So as well as helping out the RMS, to give you some information there and help you, we do have our own that you're all more than welcome to join on as well. One thing I haven't been able to pop on the slides today, because it's very, very new, is that we have our new e-learning platform available now as well, which is on our website. It's our new 522 Droplets platform, and it's all about introducing a new gateway to your transformative learning. So I'm happy to put a little link to that as well. So that's another way that you can enjoy your learning. And as Rachel was saying there, I'll just explain a bit about us, that our training is different in the way that we're all about participatory learning methods. So we make sure that all of our training, whether it be a workshop, webinar, e-learning, course, we'll always make sure that the learning is designed around your learning styles to make sure everybody can take something away and make a difference back in the business. So Thank you very much, everyone. Here's our contact details on screen as well. If you want to follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter or X, if you want to, that's absolutely fine. And like I said, I did mention in the chat as well, if you go away, you reflect and you have any more questions, just email me direct again on that link. We're happy to answer the questions as you go along. I know I'm a reflector, so I know that's something I'll do. And we also make sure that we're available for you after the session as well for things like that. So thank you very much for your time. I'll just hand back over to IRM now.
Thanks, Sharon. And thank you, Rachel. The content was fantastic. Thank you again. And thanks for sharing the Defender Checker. I think that lots of people found that really useful.
Yeah.
Lovely to see you all taking part in the poll. And as expected, the majority seem to have had a COVID-19 rollout at the front end. So that was great to see some commonality and themes across other firms that are similar to a position that my firm has been in. So yeah, again, thank you all for joining. Today's session has been recorded and will be available on the IRMS YouTube channel in a few weeks' time. Those of you who have joined today's session and are an IRMS member will receive an email notifying you that the link is available for you to view on the YouTube channel. Those of you who are non-members, please just navigate to the YouTube channel. Unfortunately, I have no way of notifying non-members that the link is up. And please check out our other sessions. There's lots of sessions available to the end of the year. And one quick plug that I'd like to make, the IRMS is putting on a IRMS roadshow. It's rock themed, and we have the first one taking place in February of next year, on the 6th of February in Manchester at the Kimpton Clock Tower Hotel, that I'm organising alongside Susie, who's the group's director at the IRMS. Lots of brilliant themes. There's some topics on AI and records management. Preservica and Dapian will be joint sponsors of the roadshow, and they'll be covering some of their tools that can help in that space, particularly Preserve 365 and Dapian's tool around answering data subject access requests. So if you're interested, please check out the IRMS website. We have a link up on the events page already for you to sign up. There are limited tickets available, and members will be prioritized. So please get in on that and let me know if you have any questions. My email address is in the chat. Please do get in touch. Thanks again for joining. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Take care.